Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ken Lambert. I'm a Deputy Commonwealth Attorney in Wise County in Virginia. For those of you who have no clue where Wise County, Virginia, welcome, or join the rest of the world. Nobody else knows where it is either. We are in the part of Virginia that's west of West Virginia. So, pretty isolated out there. In the middle of the Appalachian Mountains, and they were real clear to me that I was to pronounce it Appalachian when I got here to tell y'all how to pronounce it right. So, it's Appalachian. Our big problem out there is pills, legal drugs that are being abused. And tell you right here, here's what we got. Now, well, let me tell you where I started from. Before I went out there, for about 5 years, 6 years, I was a defense attorney in the Richmond, Virginia area. Specifically Chesterfield, which is between Richmond and Petersburg. And I handled all sorts of drug cases: cocaine, marijuana, heroin, psilocybin, ketamine, you know, kind of name it, I handled it, I thought. And, you know, when I moved out and took a job as an assistant Commonwealth attorney out in Wise County, I thought, well, I'm going to go out here and I'm going to know more than these folks out in the mountains about anything, drugs. And I got out there, and I was the most lost group you ever saw in your life. They're all talking about oxys, perks, Z's, tabs, you know, Roxys, Oxy 80s, Oxy 40s. I'm like, what in the world are you people talking about? And this is up here on the screen right here to show you these are our top 5 abused drugs in my area. I checked on this with the lady in charge of all our drug prosecution before I came here to make sure. OxyContin, Roxicodone, and Percocet, the one across the top, they're all pain pills. And opioids, to be more specific. OxyContin and Roxicodone they're sold under those names. They're actually Oxycodone is the generic name of it. OxyContin is time release, Roxicodone is not, it's instant release, so OxyContin comes in higher dosages. That, what you're seeing up there, the bottom 3 in that OxyContin are 40, 80 milligrams, and 160 milligrams. They sell for $1 a milligram on the street, so if you get an Oxy 80 milligram Oxy for $4 a pill, is what they cost at the pharmacy, or if you've got Medicaid, Medicare, or what other insurance, you may pay 50 cents to $1 a pill. You can make the rest of that $80 for every pill you sell, and they sell them, let me tell you. Now, I've never seen an Oxy 160. I pretty much figure that anybody who snorts an Oxy 160 is not going to wake up the next morning, so that's why we haven't had problems with that so much, I don't think. Roxicodone, like I say, it's the instant release. It only goes up, or I think it only goes up to 30 milligrams. The feds made, the company that makes that, stop selling 5 milligram versions because they never told them they could, and I think it was probably too popular. And then what we got over here, Percocet is one of any number of what's called hydrocodone. These are pills that, they're opioids as well. They are pills that Them, Lortabs, Vicodin, Roxicet, all these things. It's a mixture of oxycodone, to be simplistic about it, a mixture of oxycodone and acetaminophen. These are dangerous not only in the fact that they cause people to get high, respiratory failure, etc. The acetaminophen causes, acetaminophen causes damages to the breathing system, pulmonary system, causes liver failure, etc. I mean, and these are our highest. These are the ones that we see on the market the most. Percocet. They sell a lot cheaper than the oxycodones do. Down here at the bottom, Subutex. There's also Suboxone. That's buprenorphine. This was supposed to be the wonder drug that was going to cure all opioid dependency. This was not supposed to be addictive. It was not supposed to be something that you could get high off of. It's supposed to be better than methadone because, you know, now most well-run methadone clinics give the person a liquid rather than pills to take home because it's so highly addictive. But, and it can be sold. Suboxone or buprenorphine, Subutex, and that, they're supposed to be something they can take home and use. It's something that's generally put under the tongue. It's supposed to block opioid receptors. and you can't get high off of it, well, sure, shooting and sure as people start taking it home, they figured out ways to get high off of it by mixing it with other things. We also see a thriving trade in this, in that somebody is hooked on oxys or Roxys, and they can't get that this week. They will find somebody to buy at a far cheaper rate some Subutex or Suboxone, so that they don't crash, so that they can make it through until they get enough money or can find some more pills. Down here in the bottom right, Xanax, and I think you've probably all heard of Xanax. It's a nerve pill. It's meant for mental issues, anxiety. It's alprazolam. It's the only one that's not an opioid on there. It's actually benzodiazepine, benzo. And these are our 5 worst. And they're all over the place out there. And when I first got out there, I figured, okay, what's going on is cocaine and heroin hasn't gotten here. We haven't seen any of that stuff out here, so the pills just kind of moved in and took the place that cocaine and heroin was. And I spoke to an attorney who'd been around there for a while, and he kind of smiled at me and looked at me like I was, charmingly naive, and said, "You don't get it. Cocaine was everywhere out here. Every holler, every street you could get it. And then the pills came, and the cocaine was gone. It cannot compete with the pills." Heroin is also down. And I will say that's fairly true. In 5 years now I've been out there, I think I've seen 3 cocaine cases, as opposed to, I myself would represent 3 or 4 people a day that had cocaine charges when I was around Richmond. So I think I've seen 3. That's not to say that that's all there were, but it's the only ones that come to mind. The other thing that really struck me in the beginning of this was I got out there and looked around, and it was like, oh my God, everybody's dying. And they were. It was something else. I've been doing, like I said, in Richmond, dealing with all these people. You get like 1 or 2 persons every 6 months that wouldn't show up to court who died because they'd overdosed or for other reasons. And out there, it was like every week, somebody was missing court because they were dead. And I can remember a couple of weeks where it was 2 or 3 people missing court because they were dead. And I'm not talking about, the kind of court you probably see here in D.C. or you see around Richmond, where, you'd have 200 people waiting for their day in court. We're talking about a court where there's like 40 people, well, let's say more like 20 to 40 people doing court that day. And so we had a high death rate. And everybody talks about how terrible it is where they are. Next slide, please. Let me show you what I'm talking about here. The ME, Medical Examiner in Virginia, keeps records of what people died from. And between 2003 and 2008, they list every county and the per capita death rate in that county for overdoses. 2003 to 2008, the ones with the highest death rates for that year are marked there by the number. 2003 was Craig County, that's that little purple county. 2004 is Lee County, it's the last county in Virginia. 2005 is Pulaski, that's the green one over there. 2006 is Wise and the city of Norton, that's where I practice at, where I'm a prosecutor at. 2007, 2008 was Dickinson County, that red county right above Wise. And if you look at it again, of the top 5 deaths, per capita death rates of those 6 years, Dickinson County, which is the top red one, was on that list 5 years. County below that, Russell County, was on that list 5 years. Wise County, City of Norton, where I'm at, was on that list 4 years. Lee County was on it 3. You can see that's all up through the mountains there. Highest per capita death rates, and that's pills, folks. We don't really have much anything else going on. But that's the pills, and they're dying from the left and right. And to put it in perspective for y'all, next slide, please. I recall this morning, Mr. Sterling showed you that in 2007, the national death rate was up to 7 per 100,000. Now, I heard a lot before I came out of here about how terrible things are in D.C., read things in newspaper articles, kind of some of the papers that came with this. And you're right, D.C. is twice the rate, the rest of the country. Counties out there, 2 to 3 times the amount of D.C.'s death rate. So, for instance, in 2007, D.C.'s death rate was 16 per 100,000. Dickinson County, 62. Wise County, 60. Lee, 17. you notice that only one of these counties are the ones that are right along the border with Kentucky. I just chose them because they were right lined up with each other. One of these counties, Lee County, in 2008 is the only year that any of them have lower death rates than Washington, D.C. And we have high death rates with this stuff, folks. And so the question goes, how did we get there? And last Friday I was having lunch with a number of defense attorneys that are buddies of mine. And for those of you that are going into criminal law, you don't necessarily have to hate the guy on the other side. You just have to beat him, okay? If you can. And I asked them, what would you say is the problem? What should I tell people out there about this? And they're saying, tell them about the doctors. We can't shut the doctors down. The doctors are turning into pushers. They won't stop. They won't admit what they're doing. And I don't know that that's 100% fair. As a matter of fact, I don't think that's 100% fair. I think at one time, a lot of doctors were really kind of naive about it. And we do still have some naivete and greed, a large portion greed, that keeps some doctors doing it. But there are actually three parties that led to the high amount of problems we have with these prescription drugs. One's the pharmaceutical companies who are just putting this stuff out in job lots, way more than they can legitimately say, oh yeah, we know that's going to go for legal use. Second is the doctors, and they are the gatekeepers, so they do, it has to go through them. And third is the insurance companies. Now the insurance companies aren't really interested in pushing the pills, but they just kind of got caught into it because they covered how much the pills cost. So what you get is, well, let me go through the most famous case that's out there. Next slide. Purdue Pharma produces OxyContin. OxyContin is oxycodone. I think they started this in mid-90s. They started producing this. They sent out people, salespeople, set up seminars for doctors, start telling doctors, look, it's not going to be addictive. They're not going to build a resistance to this because it's all time release. It's going to cure every pain you've ever seen in your life. Short-term, long-term, repetitive, breakthrough, any kind of pain. And, the doctors, and what they don't tell the doctors is, and it's basically synthetic heroin. Okay? They just kind of don't push that part. Doctors take it back, and in places like where I'm at, in the mountains, there are two types of jobs that pay well. One's in the coal mines, the other's lumbering. As you can imagine, people get repetitive pain, they get short-term accidental pain, long-term, there's all sorts of pain that they're dealing with. So, the doctors just start writing the script out for everything. Script means prescription. They write the script out for everything. And everybody's got, all of a sudden, OxyContin. Well, the next step, of course, they've written you the script. You go to the pharmacy, you walk in the door, you got to pay for the pills, and the pills will cost you anywhere $4 to $6 a pill for OxyContin. And, a lot of times the insurance, well, most of the times, the insurance company covers it, so you end up paying like $10 a pill, right? Or not $10 a pill, $10 a bottle, right? So you get it real cheap. It gets everywhere. And, like I said, basically it's synthetic heroin. And used as it's supposed to be used, it can be addictive, but it's not as bad as when it's abused. Now, what we ran into first, well, I think this is the way it kind of developed, is that first, chewing. If you chew it, you'll get high. If you chew and swallow it, you get high. Then people figured out if you snort it, like a line of cocaine, if you snort this stuff, you get higher faster. Okay? Then they figure out that if you liquefy it and inject it, you get even higher, even faster. So it's everywhere, and all of a sudden, everybody's using it. Now, and it's signaled out Purdue Pharma here, but it's all sorts of pills follow the same track. Purdue Pharma eventually gets hit by the federal government with, the federal government in West Virginia finds it costs, I think, somewhere in about a $700 million settlement with the federal government, which, depending on which sources you believe on how much money Purdue Pharma is making off of OxyContin, I've seen sources that say they make $1 billion a year. I've seen sources that say that up to the point where they got that fine, they've made $1.2 billion, and they just keep chugging along. And Purdue Pharma has, since that time, done some things to try to mitigate. They're trying to put out a new type of pill now, other things. But, of course, other companies have stepped in. Oxycodone has gotten real popular because OxyContin's got hard to find. And, the doctors, they back up. They back off some. You know, like I said, there's some doctors that, out of greed or naivete, just keep handing stuff out. But a good portion of the doctors back off. They're like, well, this stuff's highly addictive. You know, we're just not going to hand it out. I mean, we got people shopping doctors left and right for elective surgery or to have a tooth at a time pulled so they can get pills. And I know that sounds silly, but it actually happens. So the doctors pull back, and there's only so many locally that are willing to do this. So maybe the problems can be controlled. Well, at that point, we start getting online pharmacies. Next one. And I think every one of us has probably gotten spam with this on it or something similar. I got this one 3 times in the last week, right? Each time went to a different site. And the online pharmacies start handing, you know, they arrange for you to get a script. You log on, and they may send you to a local doctor, or a lot of times they'll have a doctor on site who you write in, I stubbed my toe, I've got turf toe, terrible pain, it's awful. And that doctor on site writes out a prescription, and they then send you 2-day UPS, Oxycontin, Vicodin, Percocet. I'm here to tell you, we have the most paranoid UPS deliverers in the world where I live, because people will chase them down rather than waiting until their pills get to their house. We had a case, I don't know, a year ago or so, where some guy, the UPS driver was sitting on the side of the road doing his paperwork. Some guy found out where he was, drove over, and just started screaming at him because he wasn't delivering. He was supposed to deliver those pills. Deputies got involved in that one. So the online pharmacies are there. But you know, the thing about the online pharmacies, you have to wait 2 or 3 days for delivery. Well, that's just not fast enough. Next thing we get is pain management clinics. And the king of the pain management clinics is Florida. Next one. As you see here, in 2010, there were 942 pain management clinics in Florida. These 2 counties here alone, Palm Beach and Broward, Broward is the yellow, Palm Beach is the orange, are responsible for a huge portion of the pills that make up where we're at in the mountains. Palm Beach had 122 pain clinics in 2010. They passed an ordinance trying to stop more pain clinics from being built. Who knows if it works. And then you got Broward, which went from 4 in 2007, which were probably legitimate. There are legitimate pain clinics out there. You know, you have a hard time selling me that one of them's legitimate if they're not associated with a hospital, but there are legitimate pain clinics out there. Between 2007 and 2010, it went from 4 to 154. And that's the middle of 2010. You know where it's at now. The way this works is, well, next slide. You see here, this is a street in Florida somewhere. I don't know exactly what this is. You see there's 3 doctors on this street, right? First doctor here has got a pharmacist in his doctor's office. He advertises $4 medications. That means he's advertising Oxycontin, folks. That's what he's advertising there. $4 medication. People will drive from West Virginia, Kentucky, Virginia, Tennessee, North Carolina, all over the place and come down to these pain clinics. As a matter of fact, there is a flight from West Virginia to somewhere in this area that is so often used by people who are going to get pills that they call it the Oxy Express. Okay, it's a commuter flight back and forth every day. They go down and they hit this first doctor here, and they go in and they go, hey, you know, doctor, I've got this pain in my back, it's terrible. And the doctor writes them a prescription for a month, 2 months, 3 months worth of Oxycontin. And, you know, lo and behold, they've got a pharmacy in the office, so well, actually, most of them aren't even seen by the doctor. They're seen by some sort of nurse practitioner or something like that. They just, you know, they just write you the script, they walk the next door over, and they get themselves their 3-month supply. Then they go down here where it says walk-ins yes there, that's another doctor, and that walk-ins advertisement means he's willing to take people from out of state. So they walk in there, same thing. Doctor, I got a terrible pain in my back, I stubbed my toe, whatever. And that doctor, or his nurse, writes them 2-3 months worth of prescriptions. And there's that blue sign there, is just a guy who just says the pain management phase. He doesn't put all the fancy advertising. I'm pretty sure he gets a fair amount of traffic too. And that's all on one street. And, you know, I haven't gone down to Florida to check it out. This is the way, if you live in the mountains and are dealing with this, this is the way you envision Florida. You know, it sounds weird, but I mean, I've listened to drug buy tapes where the guy's sitting there going, look, man, I haven't got any oxys today, but Tuesday next week, I'm going to drive down to Florida, and I'll be back Wednesday with 600 or 700 pills. Come see me then. And it goes on all the time. And these aren't people who are living rich either, folks. I mean, they're dealing with thousands of dollars with the pills. The last prescription I saw from Florida, the guy had gotten $1,800 worth of pills, and over 1,000 of them were OxyContin. I saw it about 2 weeks ago. You know, they go down and they come back up, and they're living in trailers and really beat up homes and stuff. They're not making, and they got a ton of money, but I don't know what they're spending it on other than going and buying more pills. So this is the problem you've got. And to be honest with you, I think this may be kind of the next wave. You know, if you study how drugs happen, they hit in waves. You know, cocaine and heroin hit in a wave. Now we're getting the pills hitting in a wave. You can go back and see other things. There have been other times where pills have been much more of a problem. The problem out here in Florida is that they don't have a prescription drug management program, and that's a fancy way of saying they don't have a database for doctors and pharmacists to report that, you know, John Smith came in and got 30 Percocets today. So you can go from doctor to doctor to doctor. And that's been a huge problem. I mean, Florida itself has had a huge problem with lots of deaths from pain pills because of this thing. People just keep going and get more until they die. So it looked like Florida was going to shake itself up last year. They had passed some laws saying you can't have a pharmacist in the doctor's office, you got to be outside the doctor's office. Some other type of laws that are kind of more window dressing than anything else. I think they passed laws saying you can't say $4 OxyContin, which is probably why this says $4 medication. You know, they passed some advertising laws and stuff like that. And the big law they passed was that they were going to have a prescription drug management program, which means that, you know, if Doctor 1 gives you 30 OxyContin, and you go to Doctor 2 and Doctor 1's put it in the computer, you ain't going to be able to get pills from him. At least that's the theory. They passed it, but they didn't fund it. Their legislators, you know, this is a good idea, but we're just not going to put any money into it. So the people they put in charge of it then went out and found the funding, got enough money to put it together, and now the governor is doing everything in his power to kill it. Changed governors. Rick Scott has tried to kill it. Claimed it's supposed to be privacy issues. He's worried about privacy. There's some other silly stuff he said, but privacy is the only one that's got any kind of real teeth to it. And I've never seen anybody say it out loud or anything, or say it directly, but if you read through a lot of newspaper articles, they basically all but accuse him of being owned by the medical industry, which stands to lose a lot of money if this gets shut down. So this is the problem we got. You know, who knows? Oh yeah, and he also turned down Purdue Pharma, trying to get good publicity from the counter what it's had previously. Tried to donate $1 million to their prescription drug management program, which would have run it for 2 years at least, probably more into the three to four. And he turned them down flat. Refused to allow the money, private money, to go into this program. This is an ongoing thing. I mean, this program is already legislatively mandated, but like I say, he's trying to kill it. So, you know what? Kind of the question is, where do we go from here? This is something that's not spread so much. You don't hear about it in a lot of big cities yet. Now, from the mountains, it's spread westward. You know, Louisville, Cincinnati, you're hearing about it. Eastward, it's spread. You hear about it significantly in Boston. But like D.C., you don't hear about it all that much. You know, you don't hear about it in Richmond, Virginia, that sort of thing. I suspect that it's there around the edges, that law enforcement really has a hard time seeing that this is happening and report. It's real hard when you've got doctors handing out prescriptions to arrest that guy and put him in jail for that. Even if he's putting out a whole bunch of them, he can just say, well, that's the way I treat people. I believe that this treatment system is what's going to work. So it becomes difficult to really close these things down at times. You know, as far as it goes out where we're at trying to deal with it, I mean, like I say, we're flooded with it. And you know, I work for an elected official, and the sheriff's an elected official, and when people start saying, what are you going to do about this? Well, we're going to step up and do what the law tells us to do. The sheriff's going to arrest people he catches dealing it. We're going to prosecute people that are dealing it, and that's what's happening. We also have tried things like drug court. We're trying to get a drug court going for those whom we think we can help and get off of these things. You know, because a lot of people, at least initially, get hooked in without intending to. So we're trying to get people, we're trying that as best we can. Of course, the problem is it always is when a prosecutor gets the case. Most of the time, things are already broken. By the time prosecutors get it, it's often way too late to really accomplish much, except go, you know, okay, you're going to jail for 2 years, you know, and that happens. Typically in Virginia, in your first time you're caught dealing anything at Schedule 2, you get at least 7 months. You know, it's not in the federal system where you end up, you know, spending the rest of your life in prison, but you get 7 months. We don't really have a whole lot of simple possession cases because, well, they're regular pills. It's hard to make those cases. This is something that really, our jurisdiction ends at our county line. We can't get these doctors that are handing this out down in Florida, left and right, you know. It's something that the federal system has to handle, really, and they step up occasionally. You occasionally see them prosecuting a doctor who has just gone totally out of control. A lot of Medicare and Medicaid fraud cases come out of that, but they have gone as far as charging doctors with felony murder. I don't know if anyone's actually been convicted of a felony murder charge, but they've charged them. I think most of the time it ends up going down to reckless homicide, and they still get a ton of time in jail, or prison, federal prison. I don't have a solution to this, to be honest with you. I hate the analogy of war on drugs because this is a policing effort. It's been going on forever. 1875, when the first anti-drug law was passed in Virginia. You can go back, and the furthest back I can trace anti-drug laws in history is the 7th century. The Quran outlaws alcohol. They were probably further before then, and they were probably, you know, local potentates and that were making things illegal. It's been going on. It'll continue to go on. And I know that Mr. Sterling said that this really isn't a good excuse, but it's a matter of trying to limit it rather than you can't stop it. You're never going to stop it. We can put the guy in trailer 1 in jail or apartment 1 in jail. Apartment 2, who's just had his supply cut off and knows that if he drives down to Florida on a one-day trip, can come back with something that he can make thousands of dollars off of. Well, apartment 2 is probably going to step up and fill that slot. The nightmare for us is that there's something that's even worse than the pills that are out there now called Opana. And this is oxymorphone. Oxymorphone, there was a pill back in the 70s, I think it was, that they brought oxymorphone out for a while, and it was abused so badly it got taken off the market. It is basically, you know, when somebody's in a hospital and they're about to die and be screaming in pain if they weren't getting a morphine drip, that's what we're talking about. And they're starting to put that out as a pill called Opana. We're starting to see it. If you look online, which to the sites where people who use these drugs and abuse them, they get online on places like Topics and Blue Light and stuff, and they compare how you can do this and that with the drugs and how good the high is. They tell you that it's 4 to 5 times better than heroin. You know, that it's basically the one drug that's going to kill everything out if it gets there. The one thing that seems to be keeping it from really spreading hard is ethnic lines, to be honest with you. This is a white person's drug, a white person's game primarily. You know, which is kind of silly. I mean, it's like anybody who's dealt with crack, you know, people who had problems with crack, you've seen a number of black people who are African Americans that have had crack cocaine problems, but you've also seen some whites, but by and large, it seemed to be a black community issue thing, and I think probably most of my defendants that were having issues with crack cocaine were probably African American. This is the same way; it's just flipped. You know, this is seen as something that, well, they call the people who use it, at least out where I'm at, pillbillies. You know, it is something that is permeating the white underclass, the white social underclass, and doesn't seem to be getting across that firewall into, African American and Mexican poor. Now, I can't speak so much for what's happening out west. I know they're having pill problems out west as well. Those, however, seem to be coming primarily up from Mexico, not from Florida, like all ours. There may be a different dispersion out there. But if it ever does jump that firewall, I think this, like I've already said, it drives cocaine out of the market really quickly. It is as addictive as heroin or worse. And some of the effects that have been seen in places like Boston, where it's shown up, is that those people who are dealing heroin stop cutting it. They start making it more pure. They start making it better product and selling it cheaper, so they don't get driven out of the market by the pills. But I don't have a nice way to wrap this up. I'm just kind of showing you what the situation is, and I'll leave it there. We're going to questions after everybody's finished, sir.
You're ready to finish, sir?
Yeah.
I asked you a question before, let me put you on the spot about it again. Okay, primarily when we have overdoses, it is respiratory failure. It happens while they're asleep and they die without waking up. Okay, they've taken too many opioids or methadone or whatever, and they start to snore, and that's their pulmonary system failing. People don't realize it, and then everybody goes to sleep. They wake up the next morning, the guy's dead. This happens a lot. We have what they call Skittles parties, where everybody comes to the party and they bring whatever pills are in their medicine cabinet, throw them into a bowl. Everybody just starts taking handfuls of pills and washing them down with booze, and this really does happen. But okay, having given the background, that's given you for where do you think that the line should be drawn? Do you think the line should be drawn for people who may have brought it to the party? Do you think it should be drawn at, somebody's dead the next morning when you call it in? Should that still get the Good Samaritan exception where?
As when we had a conversation earlier, if someone is already dead and someone makes a Good Samaritan call, that's a real interesting question. The standard is usually in good faith. I would suppose that if you were aware of someone who was possibly still alive, then at that point you should still receive the protection. If it is plain and obvious that someone is dead and you're just calling to hopefully get some sort of protection because you have to call the coroner as well, well then, maybe there's some room for not throwing that to the protection basket. In terms of people who bring the pills to the party, I think that's pretty clearly distribution. I would say, though, when you said initially, the way a lot of people die from overdose in southwestern Virginia, where they nod off and they go to sleep and they die in their sleep, I would say that probably the best thing for that would be increased public education to know the warning signs of overdose. If the people, and it's not just public education to the general public. This public education has to go to the affected populations. It's no good to train someone who's never going to be around in a drug. I won't say it's no good. It's of little benefit to train someone who is never going to be around a drug overdose, or likely never to be around a drug overdose, how to revive someone. On the other hand, if you are a frequent user or even an attendee of such an event, then yeah, and you're of the population that would really benefit from that. Gino?
My question is for Mr. Lamer. Have you tried in Wise County any sort of more comprehensive treatment approaches or have you supported for a community-based response to the problem you have to say?
Well, I mean, we've tried various things, and the Suboxone problem, pointing out, buprenorphine and Suboxone Subutex came out of attempts to find a way that we could get something that would keep people from withdrawing from opioids, pain pills, and withdraw to keep their cravings from happening. And like I said, of course, then people started using that and found out ways to abuse it. We're trying to get a drug court going in our county, you know. Those are always kind of touchy issues, and, you know, there's a fair number of people who don't believe in them, you know, because while I think drug courts work well, they look goofy as all get out. You're from somebody on the outside watching, you know. So it's hard to convince some people to get behind that. You know, the problem, of course, is like I said earlier, a lot of times, by the time, there has to be something where the community is affected before it gets to us to really make a serious change. You know, it's all well and good to point at the prosecutor and law enforcement and say they're the problem and they may be part of it, but the reality is that most of the time, by the time they get to me, you know, I'd say 80% of them, I'm not really going to make a dent on. You know, they're already lost. And I hate to say that, but then, and this is always going to be an excuse you're going to hear from every, a reason you're going to hear from every prosecutor is after it's the point where I can't help the person. Well, my first duty is to protect the people of the county and, you know, help that person who's being charged if I can. If I can't help that person, I'm going to protect the people of the county. And the only tool I have for that is jail and prison. And to get a treatment program in Virginia's prisons, there's a three-year-long treatment program in the prisons, okay? You know, you can get NA and AA and that sort of thing in different jails, but, I mean, actual treatment program, there's a 3-year treatment program at the Department of Corrections. Somebody has to be sentenced to longer than 3 years. And I'm here to tell you, I think you have to get caught, I don't know how many times you have to get caught before you actually get sentenced that's over 3 years in Virginia, you know. So that's not really something that, you know, you don't walk up to many people and go, well, I can give you a year in jail, or we can give you 3.5 years so you got time to in-process and get into this treatment program. They aren't going to take that, you know. The primary concern of most defendants is not going to jail or getting out as quick as they can. So it's kind of, that's the situation we're in.